Hello everyone, and welcome to our tutorial on project design. By this point we have gone over our project definition. We know what the project is and what we want it to be able to do. Now we enter the design phase, in which we discuss how we want our project to look overall and how we want all the pieces to come together. So we want to build a GUI or GUI based program that just stands for Graphical User Interface. Essentially what this means is that we want some kind of screen displayed to the user with which they can interact. So that means there'll probably be buttons, text fields, text displays, checkboxes, etc. Very interactive elements. This is as opposed to something like, say, a text-based program that runs entirely within the console and is just text-related. There's no buttons or anything there. So we want to be able to display all of the patient's data inside of a table. So this is a row-column structure, with probably each row being a new patient and each column being a piece of information. We also want to be able to present a patient intake form to capture new patient information. Now this is two very distinct pieces of functionality. One is just storing and displaying, and one is capturing inputs and adding a new item. So we'll probably want a separate screen for each of these. So we can use what are called wireframes to plan out how we want our screens to look. A wireframe is essentially a non-functional version of the UI. It's a great way for us to plan our screen layouts for a graphical application, and allows us to size and place UI elements and just generally plan what our screens are going to look like before we start writing any actual code. Now there are lots of ways we can go about doing this. We could just use, say, pen and paper. We could use like a whiteboard or a blackboard and just kind of draw out how we want things to look. There are also many software tools to help us to do this. It kind of looks like we're building an application, but there's no actual functionality there. It's really just how things are going to look, shapes, sizes, colors, images, text, etc., as if it was it looks like an actual application, but it doesn't really function like one. So we're going to use this tool, drawio.zenva.com. It's just a nice, easy to use tool that allows us to build out our basic wireframes. Now, we're not going to get too fancy. We just want the basics there. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is the patient's information table. In this screen, we'll want a title, a button that will take us to the patient intake form, and we also want a table that will display all of our patient's data. So it will actually be pretty simple. We really just need these three elements, so building out the wireframes will be fairly easy. This is something that we can do together. So let's head over to that Draw.io program and get started building out our patient's info screen wireframes. Okay, so this is the website here, drawio.zenva.com. We want to start by creating a new diagram. I'm going to call this patient's table wireframe. Okay, and this will be a blank diagram. Okay, let's call this we'll call this patient's table wireframe, and we can save it to our desktop or wherever else you'd like to save it. Okay, so this is the interface. And it's great for kind of building things one screen at a time. There are fairly generic elements here. There's other miscellaneous elements. There are more advanced. There's stuff specific to, let's say, Android or Bootstrap or iOS. So there's lots of tools that allow us to build various UI components. Now again, our goal is just to get something really simple out there on the screen to show you how to, roughly speaking, how to wireframe. So we'll start with a vertical container. This will represent a single screen. Okay, so this is our patient. This is actually our patient's table. So this can be something like all patient information. Okay, and because this is the entire screen, we know we need a title. We'll probably have a button up top and then the table underneath. So let's get a title on screen, and this will say something like all patients. Okay, let's make this a little bit smaller. I think this is pretty big. So let's maybe bring it down to 20. Okay, we'll select the element itself. We can just move it over a bit. Okay, next up we'll want a button. Now we could just represent buttons with this kind of rounded rectangle here. We want a button beside it, and this button is going to be used to bring up the Add a New Patient screen. I do want to try to make sure that these are aligned. There we go. And instead of a title, I'm just going to put in some text, like so. Okay, this again, pretty big, so let's bring it down to 15, and this is Add New Patient or something like that. Okay, so this is a button when pressed that will bring up the patient intake form. Okay, so the final item that we need is going to be a table. Now, rather than having a table like this, I'm actually just going to have a grid, and perhaps something like this seems kind of appropriate. Okay, we do want a few more columns, so let's see if we can add columns to this. Let's see if we can do edit data. Okay, this is going to be a more complex process, so maybe we should choose something else. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and save this. This is, again, our patient's table screen wireframe. So we just want the title, the button, and our table. Okay, so if we go back to the slides, that's our patient info table done. The next item on our docket is the patient intake form. We'll need a title. We'll need text inputs for the first name, last name, height, and weight. We'll need a date picker for the date of birth. That will just be a button that when pressed will pull up a date picker. We'll want a checkbox for the medication status. So if it's checked, they are taking medication. If it's not checked, they aren't. And finally, we want buttons to save or cancel. So when the save button is pressed, we'll gather the information and create a patient. When the cancel button is pressed, that will simply dismiss the screen. Now, rather than implement it together here, I think I'm going to leave this as a challenge for all of you. We have been able to successfully create the wireframes for the previous screen, and so this one, although a bit more complex, shouldn't be too difficult to create. If you do want to go into application development or a lot of other software development jobs, you will need to learn how to use wireframing tools, so this will be great practice for you. And of course, don't worry, we will go over a solution together at the end, but I do want to give you a chance to try this for yourself. Okay, so let's end this here. Try building out the wireframes for this screen, and in the next section, I'll go over a solution with all of you. So thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Hello everyone and welcome back. This is the second half of our project design tutorial. In the first half we introduced the concept of wireframes and created the wireframes for our patient's table screen. Now we're going to go over a solution for the wireframe for the patient intake form. Remember, it needs a title, it needs text inputs for the first name, last name, height and weight. We'll want a date picker for the date of birth, a checkbox for the medication status, so whether or not they are taking medication, and then buttons for saving or cancelling. So let's see what we came up with. Let's head over to Draw.io. Okay, so this is kind of what I've come up with. Something fairly basic. We have a title, it's the patient intake form. We have a first name label and then the text input, last name label, text input, height and weight, and then the text inputs here. Now, interestingly enough, the way that PySimpleGUI is going to work, we'll have a date picker button. We press this button, it pulls up a date picker, we select a date, and then the date will display in this text box. That way the user has the option of either entering the date manually or pressing on the date picker and choosing a date that way. We also have a checkbox here. It says it has a yes or no beside it for whether or not they are taking medication, and then we have our cancel and our save buttons. So all of our requirements are fulfilled. Hopefully you came up with something similar, because this is what we're going to be building, and this is actually very similar to what the final product will look like. Okay, so that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the project implementation phase coming right up.